Hello, podcast family. Hope you guys are having a great day. I'm your host, Rocky Roark. Today, we are going to be talking about how you can use agency partners to help fill those gaps and clear out those dry spells when you have no new client work coming in. Now, before we jump in, just a quick little bit of housekeeping or cleaning or whatever you want to call it. I don't know the right terminology there. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time and just listening or watching this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever it is that you are consuming this content. Thank you so much. If you don't mind, please definitely hit that subscribe button, click the like on this video, and comment below if you have any questions or you have any thoughts on today's subject matter. It's always great to be able to engage with all of you, so I really look forward to that. Now, we're going to do something a little special today. I'm actually going to give a quick shout out to a listener of the podcast and someone who recently applied for my design internship for the Design Break podcast, Mario Gonzalez. I'm going to link his Twitter account down below in the show notes. Definitely go check him out. Thank you so much, Mario, for listening to the podcast, for engaging with our content on Twitter and social media, as well as just applying for the design internship position. I'm sorry that we didn't end up going with you, but you know what? I really hope one day that we can work together because you have a lot of great potential. So thank you so much for doing that. If you would like to be featured on the podcast in a quick little shout out like this, please definitely head on over to Apple Podcasts, give our podcast a review and a rating, and one lucky listener every single week, or we're going to try to every single week, will get a shout out and get their portfolio or their social media account featured if we have that information. So if you would like the potential to get a shout out, please definitely head on over and give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We are also going to be giving shout outs to people who follow us on Twitter and people who comment and follow us on YouTube as well. So definitely head on over and make sure that you're following the Design Break Podcast or at the Design Break Podcast on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram, etc. All right, so before we get started, before we jump into today's topic, I wanted to also just talk to you about something that was kind of interesting that happened this week. As you guys might know, I record these episodes weeks or even sometimes a month in advance. So you probably have already seen me talk about this on Twitter, or if you guys are a part of some of the Slack communities that I'm a part of, you may have heard me discuss this as well. But I wanted to share a quick little interesting thing that happened to me this week. Normally, we get leads in for Blue Cyclops, my design agency, but something interesting happened this week. I actually got a lead via Pinterest. That's right. I had a sales call this week where I was talking to the potential client. Hopefully, fingers crossed that they become a client. And I asked them, the normal questions that I usually ask, which include, how did you first hear about us, or what brought you to us, and everything like that. And they actually surprised me because they said, "Oh, I actually found you on Pinterest." And I was like, "You found me on Pinterest? Really?" "Yeah, I found some of your illustration work on Pinterest just organically, and I decided I need to reach out to him and see if he can help us with this project." And so I was kind of blown away. And the craziest thing is that the project that we might be working together is probably the largest project that I've gotten outside of just regular referrals. So it's bigger than what I've been getting from Dribbble over the last 4 years. In fact, nothing has really come from Dribbble, but it's just crazy to see the potential that came from Pinterest, which is an avenue that I've never really thought of exploring. So you never know where you're going to get your client leads. It can pleasantly surprise you. So let's actually go ahead and jump on into today's episode. If you guys are watching the podcast on YouTube, you'll probably see me look down at my notes. I have kind of a general outline for today's episode. I'm not going to stick to, specific scripts anymore. I felt it was kind of boring, especially probably boring for those looking, at me, because you're seeing me looking off and reading information. So we're going to go back to just having quick outlines and everything like that. And yes, I will probably read some dialogue and things like that. But, let's jump into today's topic. So to rehash, what we're going to be talking about today is how you can partner with agencies or have agency partners that can fill those gaps in your client work. Now, a lot of us out there, a lot of you out there listening to this are probably like, how in the world is that possible? How does that work? And so let me just talk about what I've experienced in the past. And so the biggest thing is, as a freelancer, as a small agency, you are going to have moments of feast and famine. I've talked about this a lot on the podcast, on social media, and everything like that. And it's just going to happen. It's something that will generally happen quite often. And there are ways to kind of like combat that and, keep away from doing stuff like, or keep yourself out of danger when it comes to that. And honestly, I've talked about that in depth in some of the past episodes. But in today's episode, I figured I would touch on a specific way of combating that. And this is something that originally was just sparked from a tweet. Someone had, asked, hey, how are you guys filling the gaps? How are you guys, finding, work or getting consistent work that's not necessarily like one-off projects? And so I actually thought about this, and I thought about how in the past, one of the best ways that I filled the gaps was through working with agencies. Even though I'm a freelancer, even though I have my own agency, partnering with agencies is probably one of the lesser talked about ways of getting work and getting consistent work. In fact, this week, one of my leads that I was talking to is actually an agency who is looking for someone that can help with overflow. And so those are the moments, those are the types of client interactions that I'm talking about today. So I kind of went a little, blue in the face there, but let's go back to like the beginning, where this whole idea came from. Early on, while I was freelancing, building up my agency, building up my design studio in 2016 to 2018, I fell into some easy traps. And when we were talking about the pricing models in previous episodes for my profitable pricing for freelancers mini-series, I talked a little bit about this. I ran into a lot of traps, which included retainers. Retainers can easily become a trap, especially early on in your freelancing career, where you become so comfortable with a retainer. It's basically almost like you have a full-time job where you're getting a monthly paycheck from the client and everything like that. And so you continuously go on. You say, oh, I don't need to go and market myself. Oh, I don't need to put out new stuff on my website or social media. And then what happens is ultimately they cut the project. And so like that happened to me quite a bit, especially like in those first couple of years. I had 2 retainer clients that I relied heavily on, and I held no ill will towards them or anything like that, but they both canceled within a month of each other. And I had no other client work coming in. I had no leads coming in because I hadn't been putting myself out there. Everybody thought I was super busy and that I didn't need new projects. And so it quickly created a trap for me. Fast forward, after I got beyond those retainer clients, I started to reach out to other freelancers and reach out to friends of mine who had done freelancing, asking them for advice on how I could fill my pipeline of clients and client work and things like that. And it's actually interesting because in next week, I'm going to be recording a podcast episode specifically with the people who helped me with this. But my friends, Brian Burkett and Josh Wayne, who are amazing freelancers. Josh is a UI UX designer, product designer extraordinaire, amazing guy, amazing person when it comes to product design. And then Brian Burkett, who's been a friend for many, many years. He's a developer, programmer, and he also does design on the side. But they actually introduced me to this whole concept that we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to try and talk a bit more about this in more detail with them. And I'm sure they'll want to expand upon it. But the idea was to find agencies that you could partner with. A lot of agencies, especially bigger ones, they have a lot of overflow. And what do I mean by overflow? Basically, overflow is where there's a lot of work coming in, but they don't have enough in-house talent to cover all of that work. So what they have to do is they outsource to other agencies or freelancers, contractors, and things like that to kind of cover the basis and tackle some of these projects that they either don't have enough manpower or they don't have the skill set to tackle this type of work. And the great example of this is like with illustration. Some agencies, are great when it comes to branding, or great when it comes to motion graphics, or marketing strategies, advertising, things like that. But they might not have someone on staff who can handle complex illustrations. And so a lot of times they look for illustrators, they look for animators, they look for just general graphic designers who can take on projects that they might not necessarily be able to take on themselves, or they don't have the bandwidth for. And so by finding agencies that you can partner with, a lot of them, especially if they work with you one time and they're like, oh, this person is great to work with, we need to bring him on for other projects, they will keep sending you work continuously. When I was working for myself for 5 years total, from 2016 to 2021, it was something where agencies basically accounted for between 25 to 75% of all of my client work. That was a huge amount. And I didn't even really think about this until recently when I started talking about this strategy, is that, that's a large chunk. And that really helped, fill the gaps, especially when there weren't massive freelance projects coming in directly from clients. And so it may seem a little bit intimidating, to think about this and to think about, reaching out to a large agency or a medium-sized agency and asking like, hey, do you need help with overflow? Hey, do you need help with this or that and everything? And it's very easy to run into the trap of being that cheesy car salesman that we talked about in previous videos. And so you want to be very careful. So what I've kind of done with this episode is I've put together some helpful 5 tips and techniques for finding agency partners. Because that's kind of like what you guys really want to know, is you want to know, how do you actually go about finding the agency partners? Talking about, why they're so important, I could go on and on about that. In fact, we probably will when it comes to talking to Brian and Josh in a later episode. But I figure in this video, or in this podcast specifically, going over some specific, touch point specific tips will probably help you out a whole heck of a lot more than me just rattling on like I'm currently doing. I do apologize. So let's go over, 5 tips and techniques for finding agency partners. And I'll try and elaborate on this, a bit further. But what you want to do, tip number one, is that you want to determine the type of agencies you want to partner with. There's so many different design agencies, so many different, powerhouses of creative, expertise out there. And so it's very important that you think about what agencies will work best for you, or what agencies are probably going to be the best fit for you to reach out to. So, for instance, you have branding agencies, you have web agencies, you have multidisciplinary agencies. Those are the, basically the places that, tackle everything and anything above the sun or below the sun. I can't remember. I'm horrible with these, little things. But, basically, like there's so many different kinds. And so, for instance, with me, when I first was working on finding agency partners, the skill set that I knew that I wanted to focus on was illustration. And so it was very, very easy for me to realize, okay, branding and web agencies are probably going to be the best fit for this. They're probably going to be the best type of client or best type of agency to reach out to, because those are types of agencies that need illustration work. And so, notice I'm not talking about an illustration agency. There's not a lot of them out there, but there are, some. And that's because it's better to focus on an agency that doesn't specialize in that specific skill. However, they will need that skill. Let's talk about web design agencies. Web design agencies are like the perfect partner for illustrators, because a lot of web design agencies have clients, have projects, whether it's, product, whether it's marketing sites, landing pages, full-blown website designs, things like that. that will always have illustration needs. Illustrations are one of the best forms of communication when it comes to storytelling, especially on a website. It's a lot better to have a illustration that you are using to showcase information than a photograph. In fact, an infographic is a great example of that marries design and illustration together. And I just remember hearing earlier today on another podcast that it also competes very highly in analytics when it comes to video. So it's very close together with that. So, it's very important that you find, the right type of agency that you want to partner with. If you are a branding designer, again, web agency will be good. A branding agency may be good, but they're probably not going to have too many projects for you. You might be able to work out some sort of referral program for the smaller projects that they can take on that have lower budgets, but they're probably not going to hire you because they probably already have many designers that can handle those types of projects on their books. So, focus on agencies that might be the opposite of what you like to do. All right, number 2 is create a list of agencies that you would like to work with. Let's see, you have all of these major agencies that you're probably thinking about. You probably follow them on social media. You probably watch their YouTube videos and things like that. It's not always the best case to reach out to the larger agencies. They might have use for you, but they also might have other means to fill those capabilities. And so what you want to do is you want to kind of create a broad list. So you know what kind of agencies you want to work with. What you can do is you can choose 2 to 3 cities. And when I say 2 to 3 cities, large cities. So for instance, I live near Atlanta. So I would choose Atlanta. I would choose Los Angeles. And maybe I might choose, let's say, San Diego, because I used to live there. And so what you're going to do is you're just going to go to Google. And for instance, let's talk about web agencies. And you're just going to go to Google and you're going to type in Atlanta top branding agency, web agencies. And you're just going to go through and you're going to do these searches. And there's going to be lists that pop up of some of the best agencies in these cities. And so all you do is you create a spreadsheet in Google or in Notion, and you just write down all these agency names, put their websites down, their specialties, things like that. And so what you're doing is you're creating this database of all these different names of all these different agencies, and you're kind of putting them all together and trying to figure out the best way of reaching out to them. Now, it's very important also, like I said, look at their website, look at their social media accounts, and look for achievements. Look for news, coming out of these agencies. Someone just won a Gold Addy Award, or somebody just, launched a major campaign with Toyota or something like that. But notate these achievements in the spreadsheet. So that way you can utilize this in the next step. So step number 3, start building a network of creative professionals who are working at these agencies. The easiest way to do this is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably the unsung hero when it comes to networking, when it comes to finding clients. I think it's one of the best ways that you can find clients. And so basically what you're going to do is you're going to type in that agency that you just found, and then you're going to look for, they usually have employees or number of employees that you just click the link and it automatically will go and show you a list of every single person who is listed as being employed there on LinkedIn. And so what you're going to do is you're going to find all of the senior level people. And this is very social hacking. This is very weird to kind of do this, but honestly, this is a great way of kind of getting your foot in the door. And so what you're going to do is you're going to find the creative directors, art directors, senior designers. Of course, that's kind of pushing it. Founder, CEO, marketing person, things like that. You're going to find those types of people. Following a junior designer or a brand designer or a web designer, not going to really get you nearly as far as following the more leadership role people. Go through and like start connecting with those people. Don't necessarily send them a message or anything like that yet. Just connect with them. Wait for them to approve the connection or not approve the connection, and then just as you're going through, as they're accepting the connection, notate that in the spreadsheet. So notate like who you have connections with at these companies, and then you can kind of like put together this nice solid database of people that you could potentially reach out to. And the important thing is with this is to not reach out right away. If you see, Joe Schmo go and connect with you from, this ABC agency, you might want to just go be like, oh, hey, thanks so much for connecting with me. You can do that. But I honestly think it's better to wait a few days, wait a week or something like that. And then you can send a message like, hey, just want to thank you so much for connecting with me. I really enjoy the work that you guys are doing at ABC. And I really enjoyed this specific project here. Just, butter them up and everything like that. And make sure that if you're messaging more than one person at the company, make sure it's not a copy and paste message. Actually go in and type it up and focus on something that they may have been a part of. And so then going into tip number 4 is to develop a cold outreach email or message that you can then send to these agencies. And so this is something that you want to do probably a week or two after you've started making connections with people who work at the agency. Start going through and liking their stuff, commenting on their stuff. Don't go every single post liking and commenting, but that way they can see your name popping up, in their feeds on social media and things like that. So that way you're kind of top of mind. So that way when you reach out to these agencies, you can, possibly be seen by someone who's like, oh, wow, I remember, seeing Rocky liking my stuff. Oh, I remember Rocky and me having a conversation in the comments on a post recently. And so they might be more inclined to respond to you than if, you were just sending something blindly out. And the best thing is with, crafting that template email is, make sure to customize it for each and every agency. Now, when you create that template, you can have a section that's just like, replace with name or replace with achievement or something like that. That's okay. They basically expect these types of messages come through. But, you can basically create like a couple different templates, couple different emails or messages and kind of A/B test them, label them as, email 1 or email 2, and then put in, in the notes on your spreadsheet, send email 1 to this company, send email 2 to this company, and you can kind of get an idea of what's working and what doesn't work. And so some freelancers, as well as myself, have found, great success in having, 2 to 3 sentence emails, like nothing super crazy. Include your link to your website or to your portfolio in your signature. That way it's not part of the main message. And, just do your best not to overload them with information. It's better to give them a little bit of information, kind of like, test the waters a little bit than try to overload them completely. And it's also good, as I said, just like with the messages on LinkedIn, include a little buttering up, butter them up with, oh, I really enjoyed that new branding that you guys did for X, Y, and Z. Oh, I really liked, your new website that launched last month. It's really awesome. And I can't wait to hear, or don't say I can't wait to hear, say, I can't wait to hear on Twitter, what, how things are going with the website. Something along those lines. It's kind of a weak, comment there, but something to consider when it comes to creating these templates or sending out these emails or messages. And then number 5, of course, is the easiest part of this, which is actually the reaching out to the agencies, or better yet, if you can get someone to introduce you to the agency. Sometimes we have, especially, in this creative field, it's a small community in reality. And so you may actually know someone who knows the founder of these agencies or a creative director at these agencies or something like that. And so it's so much better if the first email between you and this agency comes from a mutual acquaintance. Introductions help so much more than just a cold email. So if you know someone who knows someone at this agency, see if you can, use them to kind of like get your foot in the door, so to speak. It's probably one of the best pieces of advice when it comes to this whole process. I found that when you send out a cold email, at least the ones I've sent out, generally you have about anywhere between 0 to 5% return, or 0 to 5% open rate or answer rate and things like that. I've actually had a little bit better, usually 5 to 10% response rate when it comes to these emails. Now, sometimes it's, something blanket statement like, oh, sorry, we're not really looking for any help right now, but I'll keep your name on file. But when you have an introduction, when someone actually introduces you, I've actually found 25 to 50%, response rate, or even the potential of having a deal made or some sort of contract with them in the near future. So that just shows how important this is. So let's go ahead and recap these 5 tips. So tip number 1 is determine the type of agency that you want to work with. The type of work that you want to do should reflect the agency that you want to work with. Remember, you don't necessarily want to partner with an agency that does the exact same services that you do. It'll probably be more beneficial to find someone that complements your services, or you complement their services. Number 2 is create a list of the agencies that you want to work with. Remember, putting together that long list, that large list, it definitely should be a large list. You want to be able to reach out to a lot of agencies so that way you can cover a larger spread. And number 3 is starting to build that network of creatives who work at those agencies, so that way you have someone that you can actually reach out to, or you have someone who can kind of like verify, you a little bit. Number 4 is to develop a cold outreach email or message, so that way you have something that you can continuously reuse, but also that can customize specifically for each individual agency or each individual person that you're reaching out to. And number 5 is actually to just reach out to them to begin with, or have someone introduce you to that specific agency. So hopefully with all 5 of these tips, you'll be able to find yourself an agency partner or agency partners. I want to actually, touch on that as my dog is shaking next to the camera, is that you may actually want to have multiple agency partners, so that way you cover those moments where one agency might not need your help, but then you might have 2 other agencies that could use your help. So you want to kind of actually focus on, maybe going for 2 to 3 to even 5 agency partners, depending on the type of bandwidth that you currently have. So, before we close up this episode, I just want to thank everybody again for watching today's YouTube video, for listening to the audio podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you're listening to today's podcast. And if you have any questions, please feel free to comment on the YouTube video, send us a DM at The Design Break. I'm always happy to answer anyone's questions or to give advice if you need it. And so, please remember to also subscribe to the podcast and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on social media. And, I hope that this video brought you guys some sort of nuggets of wisdom, that it brought you some sort of inspiration to kind of go out there and to find yourself an agency partner. Because I think that the most important thing for freelancers in particular is to always have work coming in. So that's it for today's episode. Always remember to stay passionate, stay positive, stay creative. Thank you guys so much. I really enjoy, talking to you all and to sharing this knowledge. That's it for me. Bye.